Today at 1, George Alagiah, the much-loved presenter of the BBC News at 6, has died. He was 67. A well-respected journalist and author, he was diagnosed with bowel cancer in 2014.
And that's the BBC's News at 6.
His was a trusted voice of authority, and he spent the last few years calling for better NHS cancer screening. His work in Africa was often memorable. His reporting gave a voice to millions. We'll have an appreciation of a remarkable life, also this lunchtime. Thousands flee the wildfires in Rhodes as blazes spread out of control. More repatriation flights bringing British tourists back are planned.
We could see the fire, it was coming down, there was nowhere for us to go, the beach was a dead end. And the struggle to get on the boat, it was very, very traumatic.
The government sets out plans to build a bulk of new homes in cities, vowing not to concrete over the countryside.
And coming up on BBC News, one of the tournament favourites, Germany, get their World Cup campaign off to an impressive start by beating Morocco 6-0.
Hello there. The journalist and presenter, as well as author, our colleague, George Alagiah, has died. He was 67. He was diagnosed with bowel cancer in 2014, and in recent years used his voice to champion better NHS screening for the disease. In many ways, he was a pioneer in British broadcast journalism. Born in Sri Lanka, he was one of the first people of colour working for a major UK broadcaster to report extensively on the part of the world that became known as the Global South, shining a light on the ordinary lives of millions of people, most notably perhaps in Africa, whose everyday lives were often ignored or relegated to the inside pages of newspapers. The BBC Director General, Tim Davies, said today that George was more than just an outstanding journalist. Audiences could sense his kindness, empathy, and wonderful humanity. Our special correspondent, Anne Little, now looks back at a brilliant life of storytelling and adventure.
3, 2, 1, go take.
At 6 o'clock, the ground war on Iraq has begun.
Millions knew him as the face of the 6 o'clock news.
Good evening and welcome to the 6 o'clock news.
And for his calm, unflappable authority.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6.
He was born in Sri Lanka in 1955 to Christian Tamil parents. As a child, the family moved to Ghana.
This is the road.
And he was swept up in the early optimism of a young nation newly independent of British colonial rule.
We knew that Africa was going to be united and that Ghana and this country was going to be at the centre of it. I mean, I think that was a kind of dream.
At 11, he was a migrant again, this time to England, where his parents enrolled him in a Portsmouth boarding school. Here, though there was some racism, he learned to adapt to a new culture and to thrive.
Born in Sri Lanka.
At Durham University, he met his wife, Frances.
Anything like that. I think when we got married, we were aware of a sort of meeting of cultures. You can see that in the wedding photos. We've got 2 sons, Adam and Matthew.
In a turbulent and often dangerous working life, she and their 2 boys were the still and unwavering centre of his existence, his solid ground.
And welcome to the Rainbow Nation. For just over a year now, South Africa has been my base as the BBC's Africa correspondent.
I knew George as a foreign correspondent. We worked together in Africa, the continent whose fate ran through his life like a thread through cloth.
Right, so this is your house, eh? Oh, it's nice. It's nice.
I thought of him as a kind of mentor. I was inspired by his example. He was brave, calm, and kind.
Okay, you get the water from here and do that.
I admired his gift for reaching into the hearts of those caught up in war or natural disaster, winning their trust even at the worst moments of their lives. In a refugee camp in eastern Zaire, hundreds were dying every day of preventable illness.
I asked her what she wanted from life. A job, she said, so I can look after little Petty.
In Somalia, he met a woman whose 10-year-old daughter had just died. His own children were about the same age.
It seemed wrong to be there at what should have been a moment of private grief. She said it was all right if it might help to save her other daughter.
I haven't the heart to count, and it doesn't really matter.
There were moments when he crossed the line between merely witnessing and actively intervening in the pain of others.
We took those we could manage to the French military hospital. At times like this, it's impossible not to cross the line that divides us, the observers, and those we observe.
The Rwandese translator we worked with then, Seth Ngarambe, told us his Tutsi wife had been murdered by Hutu extremists. But he was later accused of complicity in her murder and jailed. George wanted to know the truth, however painful, and went to find him in prison. The nature of their reunion, the power of it, says something profound about the George we knew and his extraordinary talent.
You're looking well, looking better than I thought.
Yes.
Hey? Come, Seth, can we go and talk somewhere?
Diamond, it's wonderful.
He even charmed men at the heart of Sierra Leone's normally secretive diamond trading business.
Look, this is the biggest you've seen all day.
Yeah.
The world of the so-called blood diamond.
This is something to write home about.
No, this is about $2,000, $2,500.
So you're in the clear.
In Ghana, he went back to his old school.
Somewhere in here is me. Go on. Yes. Well done.
He would later say that he was destined to spend his adult life in Africa dispelling the dream he had nurtured so carefully as a child. He was in Johannesburg in the Mandela years, a time of bright promise. Mandela, in his 70s, was about to remarry.
And now, sir, the future, you're a man in love?
It is a wonderful moment for me, as anybody else, to be in love.
When he returned to the UK, he brought to the studio a wealth of wisdom and experience gathered over years on the road. Though in the seconds before his first 6 o'clock news, there was some trepidation.
At 6 o'clock, these are tonight's top stories.
He was diagnosed with cancer in 2014. After a grueling round of treatment and multiple operations, he couldn't wait to be back in the tumult of the newsroom. He was deeply moved by messages of support and affection sent in by countless viewers he'd never meet. And on his first day back, made this small concession.
And I just want to say it's good to be back with you. That's all.
Off-screen, George was funny, clever, a generous and confiding friend, and full of energetic hope. There was something infectious about his optimism. You always walked away from time with George feeling better about the human race and the world in general.
And that's the BBC's News at 6.
The migrant boy whose family left Sri Lanka with nothing found his home in a changing Britain, and he took this country to his heart.
It's goodbye. The news continues, though, here on BBC One.
I watched George for years up close and thought this of him, that people wanted to tell him their story because in his journalism they saw the outstretched hand of a shared humanity and of solidarity.
The journalist, presenter and writer George Alagiah, who's died at the age of 67. On a personal note, George touched all of us here in the newsroom with his kindness and generosity, his warmth and good humour. We loved him here at BBC News, and I loved him as a mentor, colleague and friend. His spirit, strength and courage in the later years of his life are something his family can be so proud of. Journalism has lost a giant. In our other main story today, the Foreign Office says there are between 7,000 and 10,000 British tourists on the Greek island of Rhodes, where wildfires have forced many people from their homes and hotels. They're being urged to take advice from tour companies about what to do, and holiday firms are sending planes to pick up those who may be stranded. Some have had to sleep at the airport or in sports halls, conference centres and even out on the streets. And today there are evacuation orders in place because of spreading wildfires for parts of Corfu and Evia. Zoe Conway has the very latest. OK, Theo, thank you. Theo Leggett there. It is 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. And one of the most familiar faces of BBC News, George Alagiah, has died at the age of 67. He'd been living with bowel cancer. And coming up, the Afghan women's football team who fled Kabul and are now playing in the World Cup in Australia.
Coming up on BBC News, Brazil star Marta will have to come off the bench against Panama if she's to become the first player to score in 6 World Cups.
The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, has set out plans to build thousands of new homes in urban areas, creating what he calls an inner-city renaissance. He says he wants to make it easier to convert empty retail premises and betting shops into flats and houses. However, critics say such conversions are often poor quality. It comes as Rishi Sunak insists the Conservatives will meet their commitment to building 1 million homes before the next general election, expected sometime next year. Our political reporter Peter Saul has more from Birmingham. Bit of a soggy weekend here in the UK for many parts, but they're roasting down in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, such huge contrasts across the continent at the moment. For us, whether you like it or not, there is absolutely no change on the horizon for the time of the year. Back to you.
OK, Thomas, thank you. Thomas Schaffenacker there. That's it. You can keep up with all the latest developments, of course, on the BBC website. But the news continues here on BBC One as we join our colleagues across the nations and regions for all the news where you are. Bye for now.